You can build up to 110 square meters without a building consent. There are many building projects that do not require building consent, which makes it faster and easier for New Zealanders to get on with certain projects. My name is Bahara and I make videos to help property owners and people who work in building industry in New Zealand. In my videos, I talk about the questions that are frequently asked by my clients. I'm an architect and a draft person. So if you're keen to learn more about the process of building in New Zealand, please make sure to subscribe and click the bell button to get notified every time I release a new video. Please note that in my videos, I simply talk about the rules about the topic of my videos. Whether I agree with them or not, that doesn't matter. Some of these rules might not make sense to you or to me, but that doesn't matter either. Also, be aware that you cannot use my videos as a legal advice. Now, there's a guide here which explains all the different types of building work that are exempted from building consent. This guide is 232 pages, so you can see there's quite a bit to explain. And if I want to explain them all in one video, that will make the video just so long and boring. That's why I'm going to release a series of videos covering each category of building work that do not need a building consent in a separate video. In this video, I'm going to concentrate on standalone detached building, which is section 2 of the building government website. Section 2 itself has 9 different sections, which covers a range of buildings from a 10 square meter building all the way up to a 110 square meter building. Before explaining each of the 9 sections, there are some conditions that apply to all of these 9 sections. So I'm going to explain them first. These conditions are: number 1, the building or part of it, if the building or part of it is going to be used as a sleep out, it has to be on a property that currently has a main dwelling on it. So if there is a property without a dwelling on it, you cannot build a cabin that is exempted from building consent and use it as a sleep out. You can use it as a garage or as a shed, garden shed, whatever, but not for sleeping facilities. Number 2, it cannot be more than a single story. Number 3, it can only have a floor level that is not more than a meter from the ground below it, and that is the highest point of the floor of the building. Here I forgot to mention that the total height of the building from the finished floor to the finished roof cannot exceed 3.5 meters. Number 4, it cannot include a loft or a mezzanine. Now, here we are talking about the structure of the building. So if you have something like a loft bed or internal fit out, that is something like a furniture and it's not a permanent structure, that is not what we are talking about. Number 5, district planning. Now you have to make sure that you comply with all the rules in your district planning. For example, you have site coverage, setback from the boundaries, yard, pervious area. An example can be if you have a property that the maximum site coverage is 35% and you already have buildings that are 35% of the area of the property combined. This can be a combination of the dwelling, the garage, garden shed, whatever is existing on the land. You're not allowed to add any building to it, even if it's like a small 10 square meter cabin, and even though it is exempted from building consent. Next one is number 6, plumbing. You cannot have any sort of plumbing for this building. Now here we are talking about section 2 exemption. There will be some new rules coming into effect about the granny flat, and those will have plumbing and they will be exempted from building consent. But if you are building something under exemption, under section 2 exemption, they cannot have any sort of plumbing. Number 7, building code. The building should comply with the building code, no matter what. If you get a building consent or if you don't get a building consent, it has to comply with the building code. And number 8, smoke alarm. You must install smoke alarm if you're going to use the building as a sleeping facility. And it is recommended to use smoke alarms that are interconnected with the dwelling if it's possible. Number 9 is stormwater. You need to make sure that the new building, the disposal of the stormwater comply with the building code requirements. And for this, you need to get professional advice and also contact your council and get approval from them. If there is any drain laying needed for the new building, all the drains need to be laid by a licensed drain layer. Number 10, wastewater. So if you're building something that is intended to be used as a sleep out to sleep one or more people, you have to make sure the existing septic tank has the capacity to cope with the additional number of people that are living permanently on the property. Number 11, location of services. This is very important, and you have to make sure that you know all the existing underground services before starting any building project. These are services like stormwater drains, wastewater pipes, electricity, telecommunication, and whatever else is in your area. If you start building work and you don't know about what's under the ground and you damage them, you're responsible for the damage. Number 12 is setback from the boundaries of the building and from the other existing building. So this might be a little bit different from the normal setback that applies for your zone. This setback is the minimum of setback is the maximum height of the finished building from the ground. So let's say the building itself is 3.5 meters from the floor all the way to the top of the roof, and then the floor of the building is 1 meter from the ground. That makes it 4.5 meters, and you have to set back from the boundary 4.5 meters. So you might have a 2 meter setback in the zoning rule, but that doesn't mean that you can build 2 meters from your own boundary line. You have to set back 4.5 meters if your building is 4.5 meters. And the same thing applies for the setback of the building from the other existing buildings. So if there's a house or if there's a garage, you have to be away from it same distance. And number 13 is the measuring the net floor area. So all the exemptions that we are going to talk about, if they have a limit by the area, for example, it says 10 meters, 30 meters, 110 meters, we're talking about the net floor area, which is measured to the inside of the structure of the building, not to the outside. So all of these conditions that I mentioned, they apply to all of the exemptions that I'm going to talk about from now on. So I'm not going to repeat them for every single section. Now let's talk about the actual exemptions. Section 2.1 is single-story detached building less than 10 square meters. This is the old exemption that existed before the 30 square meter rule came into effect. So you can build a simple sleep out or a cabin that is under 10 square meter. You don't need to be or use a licensed building practitioner to design or build this building. And there is no limitation for the type of material to use in this building. So you can use lightweight or heavyweight material. Section 2.2, single-story detached building between 10 and 30 square meter in floor area using lightweight material. So this is similar to the old 10 square meter rule, except the area has increased to 30 square meter now. Now you can build this and you can use this exemption if the building is designed using lightweight material for the structure and cladding. This can be timber or steel framing with a timber or steel-based cladding like plywood cladding, weatherboard, corrugated iron, etc. Again, to use this exemption, you don't have to be or use a licensed building practitioner to design or carry out the building work. Section 2.3, single-story detached buildings up to 30 square meter in floor area with prefab or kit set components. This is same as section 2.2. There is no but there is no limit for the type of material used. They can be lightweight or heavyweight, but they have to be designed and supplied by a prefab manufacturer. And now, if you're buying a kit set building from a supplier, you have to ask them if it has the sign off from a chartered engineer, professional engineer. And if in the specification they ask for the building to be built by a licensed building practitioner, it has to be built by a licensed building practitioner. If it doesn't specify that, you have to ask the supplier and or the council to make sure if you can do it as a DIY or not. Section 2, for single-story detached building do not exceeding 30 square meter in floor area. This is exactly like Section 2.2, so it's not about prefabricated buildings. It's the building that can be bespoke designed, but this is if you are using heavyweight material in the building. In that case, it has to be designed and built by LBP or registered engineer, registered architect, similar qualified professionals. Section 2.5, unoccupied detached building for housing fixed plants or machinery. This is a very vague one about the area of the building, so it doesn't say what is the maximum area for this building, but it does say that this building cannot be entered often. The main purpose of these buildings are for housing the equipment, for looking after maintaining a building, or if there is a building that has a building consent and is under construction and the people who are working on that project can use this building. All the common rules that I mentioned at the start of the video still apply to this building, such as the height of the building from the ground, the finished height of the building itself, the setback from the boundaries, etc. There is no maximum area mentioned in this section, and also you don't have to be or you don't have to use a LBP to design or build these buildings. Now the most exciting section or sections, section 2.6 and 2.7, both of them are for building pole sheds up to 110 square meter in the area. Now in section 2.6, it says that it has to be designed by a chartered professional engineer. So it cannot be designed by a licensed building practitioner, only an engineer. And if the engineer specifies that the building has to be built by a LBP, it has to be built by a LBP. Or if the engineer specifies that it can be built by anybody, as long as they built it to the design, it can be built at a DIY. The section 2.7 is exactly same. The difference is if it's designed by a LBP designer. Now, if it's designed by a LBP designer, when we talk about design or carried out, it can be designed or supervised, but it has the sign off. So if it's designed by a LBP designer, it has also been built by a LBP builder or supervised by a LBP builder. Now, when we talk about the LBP should be relevant to the type of the work that is being carried out. For example, if it's designing the building, only the LBP designer can design it. LBP builder cannot design and other way around as well. So a LBP designer cannot go and build a building just because they have an LBP. So they have to be an LBP builder, if it makes sense. Now you might think that is very exciting. I can go and build a garage that is 110 square meter. It has its own limitations. So pole sheds are normally referred to buildings like such as hay barns or stables that are used in rural areas. So it can only be built in rural zones, and they are not habitable. So you cannot have part of the building sectioned as a workshop or office. It has to be. It can only be used as non-habitable space. It can be semi-enclosed or completely enclosed, and pole shed is just a term. It doesn't mean that you have to use poles. So it can be designed using the normal timber frame or steel frame. Also, these buildings are lower risk buildings, so they can be designed to the importance level 1, which means that it might not comply with the building code requirements for a habitable space like a sleep out or a office or workshop. And now there's also another limitation, which is the wind zone. So it cannot be located in a wind zone more than a high wind zone. And I know most of the rural areas are more than high wind zone. There is no restriction in the type of material that you can use. It can be lightweight or heavyweight. Also, the height restriction, which is 3.5 meters from the finished roof to the finished floor of the building, increased to 4 meters from 3.5 meters, which is for other buildings that are exempted in Section 2. Also, the building is not accessible by public. So if you're, for example, in a rural area and you have a roadside store which you might sell some of your farm products, and it can be accessible by public, so this exemption doesn't cover that, and you have to apply for a building consent for a building that is accessible by public. If you build a pole shed, you're not allowed to change the use of the building to another building. So if you have a pole shed on your property that's been built under the exemption from building consent, even though it is 110 square meter and it's big and you can convert it to a house, you're not allowed to do it unless you notify your city council, and then you have to apply for a building consent, and you have to prove to your city council that the structure complies with the building code for a habitable, for a house actually. So if you are building a pole shed with this in your mind, that in future you might decide to change it into a dwelling, it's best to get it designed to importance level 2, which is for residential buildings. And although you're allowed to apply for a building consent to convert this to a residential building, I do not recommend you to do it. If you know that you're building 110 square meter pole shed to convert it to a residential house in future, I recommend you to apply for a building consent from day one, because that way you get the value for your property instead of doing it like how they say reverse engineer, and then you have to pay more for your architect, more for the council, and at the end of the day they will write it in your limb report that the building has a certificate of acceptance for the structure instead of code of compliance. Section 2.8 is for repair or replacement of an outbuilding. So if you have an outbuilding like a greenhouse, a garage, a pool house, whatever, that is existing on your property and you want to repair it or completely replace it with a building of the same size, you do not need a building consent. Now, there are a few conditions that has to be met to use this exemption. The repair or replacement is made within the same footprint area of the existing building. So if, for example, the garage is 10 meters by 6 meters, it's a huge garage, you can replace it by another garage exactly same size, or it can be smaller. It can be, for example, 6 by 6 instead of 10 by 6, but it cannot be bigger. It can't be replaced by a 12 meter by 6 meter garage. B, in case of any replacement, the replacement is made with a comparable outbuilding or part of an outbuilding. Now, C, the outbuilding is a detached building that is not more than one story. So if it's a garage that has a mezzanine floor in it, you cannot replace it with a garage with a mezzanine floor without a building consent. You can replace it with a garage without a mezzanine without building consent, but if you have to keep the mezzanine floor, you have to apply for a building consent. D, the outbuilding is not intended to be open or used by members of the public. So same example as before, if you have a road stores selling the farm supplies to public people. It can be a big building like a 60 square meter building, and you want to replace it. You cannot replace it under this exemption because it's accessible by the public. This exemption is not exactly like for example, you can change the type of roofing. The existing building might have concrete tiles on the roof, and then you can have the color steel roofing, or the cladding. The existing cladding can be brick, and you're building a new building, same size, same height, but you use weatherboard or plywood cladding. That is allowed. And Section 29 is demolition of detached building. If you're knocking down a building, a detached building up to 3 stories, you don't need a building consent to demolish it, but you have to consider a few things before going and knocking the building down. Contacting the relevant services authorities to advise them of the extent of work and discuss the requirements of the termination of the services. This can be gas pipes, water pipes, any other services that are servicing the building. Be handling and disposing of hazardous material, like if it has asbestos in the building material, it has to be handled by professionals. C, controlling silt runoff. So if it is like on the side of the road, you have to think about how you're controlling the silt runoff from the demolition work. And D, securing the site and restricting the access to the public if it's accessible by public. And also, as a building owner, you should check with your county requirements for repair and reinstatement of any damage that you might cause to the council properties like footpath or roads. It is also recommended that you use the skilled people for this type of the work. So don't go and get a hammer and start knocking down your building yourself. And no demolition work should be undertaken on heritage buildings without first checking with your local council for its approval. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the first video I made about the building work that you do not need a building consent to carry out. There will be other videos for other types of building work that do not need a building consent. I'll see you in the next one.